When the nation's top law enforcement official looks a member of Congress in the eye and says, "You're failing, not me," it's not authority speaking, it's defiance. What unfolded next wasn't just another tense hearing on Capitol Hill, it was a window into how power behaves when it stops being accountable. This moment between FBI Director Kash Patel and Representative Madeleine wasn't politics as usual, it was something far more revealing, a clash that showed how deep the divide between justice and loyalty has become in Washington. Dean began by holding up a slim government document, the FBI's so-called skinny budget request, and she pointed to a single line buried deep inside: "The undoing of the weaponization of the FBI is one of the administration's top priorities."
Without due process, and he's fully ignored a unanimous Supreme Court order, and then over the weekend wasn't sure if he was obligated to uphold the Constitution of the United States. In your book, your recent book, Government Gangsters, you include an appendix with a list of names that people have referred to as an enemies list. Now, I know you will claim it's just an appendix, not an enemies list. So let's focus on how the president sees it, on what the president calls it. And you proudly display his quote on the front cover of your book. The president calls this a brilliant roadmap, a blueprint. And I have not even raised your storied children's book, The Plot Against the King. It concerns me how many people from this blueprint have been targeted with executive orders and FBI investigations. The FBI cannot be weaponized, and under your leadership, it has been nothing but a weapon alongside the president to go after the president's perceived opponents, to stifle dissent and free speech. A few weeks ago, as we saw through a social media post that you quickly deleted, the FBI arrested a judge in Wisconsin for correctly asking ICE officials if they had a judicial warrant instead of an administrative warrant, which they did not have. Despite this judge following the law, on the morning of April the 25th, the FBI arrested the judge in an escalation of the weaponization of the FBI under your leadership. Let me be clear. A functioning democracy does not lock up judges. I am gravely concerned about the utter lack of independence of the FBI and its weaponization under your leadership. I am concerned that the president is using this book, your book, as a blueprint, as he has said. It's a blueprint for revenge. And I am concerned that your eagerness, a childlike giddiness to carry out the president's revenge tour, you've shown yourself to be unserious in your statements before you were sworn in and some after. You've shown yourself unfit to lead this important agency. I was an impeachment manager for President Trump's second impeachment. It was a sad, solemn duty. And so I wanted to ask you about that. Mr. Patel, as you and the president continue to weaponize and investigate his perceived enemies, as you follow this blueprint, when can I, a former impeachment manager, expect the FBI at my door?
Ma'am, you want to know who was targeted by a weaponized FBI? Me. You want to know how and why?
Well,
you want to know what I'm doing to fix it?
That. Let me move on.
Well, you should read the book because there's no enemies
So-
list on that book.
so
There are
you-
people that violated their constitutional obligations and their duties to the American people.
That's good. You
And they
gave
were
them due
rightly
process.
called out.
I'm
And
changing
you should
topics.
give that book to every one of your constituents so they can
changing
read
topics.
about it.
I won't be doing that.
That's their loss.
During your Senate confirmation hearings, you repeatedly denied having any involvement as a private citizen in the firing of FBI officials who engaged in the prosecution against January 6 insurrectionists, the violent rioters who beat and killed Capitol police officers, and whom you referred to as political prisoners. Since then, multiple whistleblowers have come forward, and we know that you likely committed perjury. At the same hearing, you claimed you were not familiar with Stu Peters, an anti-Semitic Holocaust denier, despite the fact that you appeared on Mr. Peters' podcast 8 separate times. 8 times, and you claimed not to recall. Mr. Patel, my second question is, should we worry more about your memory or your veracity?
We should worry more about your lack of candor. You're accusing me of committing
Veracity?
perjury. Tell the American
You didn't
people how
tell-
I broke the law and committed a felony.
You did.
Have the audacity to actually
No,
put the
all
facts
right, then
forward
the answer is
instead of
both.
lying for political banter so you can have a 20-second
answer
donation hit.
The answer is both. I believe that the
The
men and
answer is
women of
you're
the,
failing, not
I
me.
reclaim my time.
Go ahead.
Mr. Patel, I believe that the members of the FBI, and I know many of them, many retired, 38,000 people, as you say, it's a little less than that now, deserve the very best, deserve extraordinary independence, deserve freedom from the fears of being investigated, the freedom of coming forward to make sure they're doing their job. And I'll end with this, that I think it's interesting that in your proposal today, you find yourself at a gulf of difference between you and the president. I wonder how you will resolve that. Will you go to the president and say, we need $11.2 billion, not what you cut out of here? You're asking for more than $1 billion than the president's request. Are you going to go to the president and straighten out that gulf?
I'll do what I've always done and represent the American people, defend this country, and make sure the Constitution is always upheld and the FBI is never weaponized. Maybe you should do the same.
So you agree with the president when he says he doesn't know if he should uphold his constitutional duty?
If you want to just keep putting words in my mouth, the TV cameras are outside.
I thank you. I yield back. Again, this is an unserious moment, sadly, for the FBI. I yield back.
More so for you.
Mr. Strong.
It sounded bureaucratic, but what she said next pulled that language into the light. She accused Patel and the administration of doing the exact opposite, turning the Bureau itself into a political weapon. Her words hit like a challenge. If this was truly about restoring independence, why did every move look like a campaign of revenge? Then she dropped the bombshell that turned a budget discussion into a public indictment. Patel's own book, Government Gangsters, had been praised by the president as a brilliant blueprint. Dean called it something else, a roadmap for retaliation. Inside that book, she said, was an appendix that listed names, people the administration considered enemies. You can call it an appendix, she said, but the president calls it a blueprint for revenge. The room fell quiet. For the first time, Patel didn't look like a calm bureaucrat defending a budget. He looked like a man being accused of scripting payback on live television. But Dean wasn't done. She reminded everyone that this so-called blueprint had already spilled into policy. Universities being stripped of funding, law firms and critics quietly investigated, judges questioned by federal officers. She recounted the story of a Wisconsin judge who'd been arrested after asking ICE officials for a proper warrant, an act that under Patel's watch had escalated into a headline-grabbing show of force. A functioning democracy does not lock up judges, Dean warned. Her tone wasn't performative, it was alarmed. And yet under your leadership, that's exactly what's happening. Patel's expression hardened. When he finally spoke, he didn't defend the Bureau's integrity, he attacked. You want to know who was targeted by a weaponized FBI, he fired back. Me. His voice rose, his jaw tight. It was an attempt to flip the script, to paint himself as the victim of the very system he now ran. You should read the book, he snapped. There's no enemies list in it. There are only people who violated their constitutional duties. Then with a smirk that landed somewhere between confidence and contempt, he added, you should give that book to every one of your constituents. Dean didn't blink. I won't be doing that, she said. Patel's reply, that's their loss, wasn't the sound of reassurance, it was the sound of power mocking oversight. What made this moment so jarring wasn't the argument itself but what it symbolized, an FBI director treating congressional accountability like an inconvenience. Then came the exchange that sealed the clip's viral fate. Dean brought up Patel's confirmation hearing, the one where he denied having any role in the firing of FBI officials involved in prosecuting January 6 rioters. Back then he'd insisted he was just a bystander. But whistleblowers now claimed otherwise, saying Patel had been directly involved in removing career agents who wouldn't bend to political pressure. Dean accused him point-blank of perjury. At that same hearing, she reminded, you claimed not to know the extremist host Stu Peters, yet you appeared on his show 8 times. 8 times, Mr. Patel. Should we worry more about your memory or your honesty? The hearing room held its breath. Patel leaned forward, visibly angry. We should worry more about your lack of candor, he shot back. You're accusing me of committing a felony. Have the audacity to put the facts forward instead of lying for a 20-second clip. Dean didn't even flinch. The answer, she said coldly, is both. That's when Patel uttered the line that will likely follow him for the rest of his career. "You're failing, not me." It wasn't just arrogance, it was a declaration that accountability no longer applied to him. The cameras caught the flash of disbelief on Dean's face. Around the room, staffers shifted in their seats. This wasn't a debate anymore, it was a breakdown in the basic idea of checks and balances. The hearing ended with formalities, but the damage was done. The moment went viral not because of its theatrics, but because of what it represented: an FBI director who saw oversight as an attack, not a duty. Dean's closing words summed it up with quiet precision: the members of the FBI deserve independence, freedom from fear, and faith in their leadership. Today they have none. And yet the true story wasn't just about one argument. Beneath the surface, this exchange exposed how institutions erode, not with coups or tanks in the streets, but with tone, culture, and small decisions that slowly change everything. When a leader starts praising loyalty over law, when memos reward compliance instead of courage, when budgets favor political allies, the mission starts to warp. No memo says weaponize the Bureau, but the message gets through. Agents begin to self-censor, whistleblowers think twice, and the kind of people who once protected the line between justice and politics quietly pack up their desks and leave. That brain drain is how democracies hollow out from within. When the experienced and principled walk away, the vacuum gets filled by opportunists. And those opportunists learn quickly that protecting power is safer than speaking truth. Dean's questioning wasn't about one man or one agency, it was about that cultural rot. She framed the problem not as a personal attack on Patel, but as a warning about what happens when enforcement becomes personal and politics becomes punishment. The bigger issue she exposed is how the machinery of government can be used to reward loyalty instead of law. Budgets, for example, sound boring, but they're the purest form of power. When Patel told Congress he needed $1 billion more than the president's proposal, Dean saw what that really meant: a turf war disguised as a funding request. Who controls that extra billion determines what gets investigated, what doesn't, and who stays untouchable. The fight wasn't about money, it was about control, and when control replaces principle, even the most respected institutions start to bend. Think about it, the FBI's mission is to protect Americans, enforce the law, and defend the Constitution. But how do those words hold up when the agency's own director uses political language that mirrors the very people he's supposed to hold accountable? Every insult, every deflection, every denial becomes a signal to agents inside the Bureau that loyalty is rewarded, not truth. Oversight in that context isn't a nuisance, it's survival. That's why Dean's insistence on calling it out matters. Hearings like this one are often dismissed as grandstanding, but they serve a deeper function. They're one of the few ways the public can actually see power being questioned in real time. A defiant answer, an evasive remark, a refusal to clarify, these aren't just words, they're data points that tell us how far accountability has slipped. Patel's dismissive tone, his eagerness to flip the accusations, and his refusal to acknowledge basic oversight protocols told viewers everything they needed to know. This wasn't a director defending a mission, it was a loyalist defending a throne. And that's exactly why this moment hit such a nerve across the country. People aren't blind, they can sense when institutions stop serving the public and start serving themselves. The real danger is that moments like this become normal. Once defiance replaces dialogue, once "you're failing, not me," becomes the attitude of power, the foundation of democratic oversight begins to crumble, and rebuilding that trust is far harder than breaking it. Because trust isn't restored through press conferences or policy papers, it's restored through humility, through accountability, through a willingness to answer even the uncomfortable questions. That's the test Patel failed. Instead of calming the room and reaffirming his oath to uphold the Constitution, he turned a constitutional hearing into a personal feud. Instead of protecting the Bureau's independence, he turned it into a spectacle, and that's what Dean understood all along. The danger isn't in the noise, it's in the silence that follows, when good people stop asking questions out of fear. What makes this hearing unforgettable is that it captured a slow-motion collision between two visions of government, one rooted in oversight, transparency, and service, the other fueled by loyalty, vengeance, and control. And the outcome of that collision will shape not just headlines but the future of how justice operates in America. So what can ordinary people do when the institutions meant to protect them begin to show cracks? Oversight doesn't end with Congress, it begins with public pressure. Demand transparency, support journalists who dig into these hearings, ask your representatives where they stand on agency independence, and most importantly, never let exhaustion turn into acceptance, because the moment people stop paying attention, that's when power stops pretending to be accountable at all. This isn't just about one director or one hearing, it's about whether law enforcement in this country still belongs to the law, or to whoever happens to hold the pen at the top. And if that sounds dramatic, remember every major erosion of democracy in history began with words that sounded too small to matter. So if you believe in fairness, transparency, and the idea that no one, no official, no director, no politician should ever be above the law, then this moment should matter to you. Don't just scroll past it, share it, talk about it. Keep the conversation alive, because silence is exactly what corruption counts on. And if you want to stay informed on moments like this where power gets challenged in real time, make sure you subscribe, hit the like button, and turn on notifications. Because the only way to protect truth is to keep shining light where power wants darkness.